The alien fleet sliced through the black of space like silent knives. Thousands of ships gliding in formation with no lights, no signals, no sound, their engines whispering rather than roaring, as if the darkness itself carried them. At the center of the armada, the flagship loomed like a jagged fortress, its steel-black hull absorbing what little starlight existed. Inside its command deck, the alien commander stood tall, wrapped in cold authority, his grin sharp and smug as the blue and green orb of the target planet grew larger in the viewing glass. His officers crowded behind him, clicking their claws in excitement. Their species had done this 100 times before, and every invasion had ended the same way, fast, clean, bloodless for them. To the commander, this was no different. The sensors flickered, reporting nothing unusual. The planet was quiet. No energy spikes, no defense systems activating, no signals that showed advanced weapons. The commander let out a low chuckle. "They don't even know what's coming," he said, and his officers joined him with cruel laughter. They didn't scan deeply. They didn't send scouts. They didn't even bother to ask what this world was called. Why would they? To them, it was just another nameless rock floating in the dark, another conquest to add to their maps, another world to burn and bend. Outside, the massive invasion fleet moved like a living wall, engines dimmed, broadcasting no signature. Their entire strategy was simple: attack fast, leave no survivors, claim the world before its people could scream. And by the look of this soft, blue-green sphere, this would be the easiest war they'd ever fought. 1 hour, one of the officers hissed, tapping its claws on the railing. 1 hour and this world is ours. The commander turned to face his crew, arrogance dripping from his every movement. "This isn't even a war," he said, his voice echoing through the steel hall. "This is an extermination." He raised a hand toward the viewport, pointing at the distant blue sphere like he was already holding it in his fist. "This will be quick." But down below, on the surface of that quiet world, something old was listening. Far beneath the oceans, buried inside forgotten bunkers beneath mountains, hidden under the crust of continents, ancient human systems flickered awake like old predators stretching after a long sleep. Satellites, once thought useless relics of a different era, whispered to one another in secret frequencies the galaxy had never learned to hear. Old warning systems, untouched for decades, sent pulses across the planet, through deep underground cables and encrypted bands. In a mountain range where snow kissed steel doors, a massive bunker sighed to life. Red lights spun in the dark, engines that hadn't turned in decades hummed softly. Long-forgotten monitors blinked with streams of data. Cameras hidden in the shadow of the atmosphere turned toward the incoming fleet. The Earth was quiet on the surface, but beneath it, a sleeping giant was stirring. On the fleet's bridge, the commander stared at the spinning blue orb as the ships aligned their trajectories. "No defense systems," an officer reported confidently, "no fleet. No resistance. They have no idea." But the sensors on the alien ships began to flicker with faint, strange static, small at first, the kind that commanders usually ignored. The alien tech dismissed it as atmospheric noise, unimportant, something the soft planet's natural magnetic field was doing. But it wasn't noise. It was the sound of Earth's old defense net waking up. Above the clouds, abandoned human satellites, once nothing more than dead metal drifting in the dark, suddenly aligned. Their optics rotated, their cores hummed. Frequencies the galaxy hadn't heard in a century began to flow. A silent code spread through the exosphere, one that humans had built for one purpose only: to answer invaders. Back on the flagship, a junior officer frowned at the sudden rise in static on the long-range scans. "Commander, the signals," he started, but the commander cut him off with a sharp laugh. "What signals? This is a dead world. Don't make ghosts out of wind." He was wrong. A hidden base buried deep under a desert. A massive steel vault slid open with a roar like a dragon exhaling, revealing a sphere wrapped in black plating, lines of red light glowing across its surface like veins. It had no name anymore. Humans had built it in a war they swore they'd never fight again. But they'd also sworn never to be caught unprepared. The machine spoke in code to the satellites above, and the satellites answered like soldiers returning to a commander's voice. The alien ships cut through the planet's upper atmosphere with ease, their formation flawless, their confidence absolute. To them, this was nothing. Just another world. But in the dark of orbit, something whispered back. A single line of text flashed across the old human command network, through buried lines, through skyward satellites, through command stations that no living alien had ever seen. One word. One signal. One name. The word wasn't a name to the human systems. It was a command. Engines that had been silent for decades roared awake beneath the oceans. Cold black submarines that weren't on any maps shifted in the dark waters. Hidden hangars beneath mountains cracked open, steel doors sliding apart like the jaws of sleeping beasts. In orbit, dead satellites unfolded like flowers made of teeth. The alien commander leaned back in his chair, relaxed, confident, unaware that the last thing any species should ever underestimate wasn't a weapon or a fleet, it was Earth itself. The planet that bled, burned, and bit back. The alien ships began to descend into the atmosphere. They saw soft blue oceans and green continents, cities glowing faintly in the night. It all looked quiet, weak. It all looked easy. But something old had already locked onto them, and in that moment, though they didn't know it yet, the invaders had made the oldest and most dangerous mistake in the galaxy. They hadn't scanned the name. They hadn't asked whose world this was, and Earth never forgot how to fight. The alien armada cut through the upper atmosphere like black knives, their formation wide and flawless, the commander's voice echoing across the flagship as he gave the order to descend, confident, certain, arrogant. Because everything they'd seen so far told them this was just another soft world waiting to be claimed. The kind of place that wouldn't even get a distress call out before it burned. From the command deck, the curved blue planet below seemed peaceful, harmless, too beautiful for war. The alien officers laughed, claws tapping against control panels, their voices sharp and cruel. They had done this 100 times before, swooping down on weak civilizations that didn't know how to fight back. This was supposed to be easy. This was supposed to be clean. All ships, formation Delta, the commander ordered, his voice thick with pride, our target is unarmed. 1 hour, and we take the capital. 2 hours, the planet kneels. His officers hissed their approval, their eyes glowing like cold steel, the sound of engines humming softly around them like predators breathing in the dark. They didn't bother to scan deep. They didn't even open communication. Why talk to prey before you eat it? Above the clouds, their massive triangular ships broke formation and spread like a black net, swallowing starlight as they went. The invasion was textbook, shock, awe, destruction. No survivors. The alien fleet prided itself on its speed. The faster the attack, the fewer enemies would even try to resist. This had worked on dozens of planets before. But none of those planets were Earth. On the surface, Earth was still quiet. The oceans lay calm, the cities pulsed with faint light, the clouds drifted in their soft shapes. It looked ordinary, too ordinary. But beneath that soft surface, deep underground, something was moving, a network older than any living soldier on the alien ships, a machine built not to be seen but to wait. The first alien ships pierced through the clouds with a low hum. Their black hulls shimmered faintly as heat shields glowed red against the atmosphere. Civilians on the ground looked up, phones in their hands, not realizing what was coming, because the sky was clear, the night calm, but the machines in orbit saw everything. Satellites that hadn't blinked in years lit up at once, old defense grids whispered in binary, and buried somewhere deep under a mountain, a single green light turned red. In the flagship, an officer frowned slightly at a small flicker on their scan. Minor interference on the long-range channel, he muttered. Another officer shrugged. Atmospheric distortion. Irrelevant. The commander didn't even turn his head. He was busy watching the glowing image of Earth on the holoscreen, his claws gripping the rail like a king leaning over his conquered kingdom. The flicker on the scan returned again, stronger this time. In a bunker buried beneath what once was a forgotten military installation, steel doors rumbled as ancient engines roared to life. The walls were lined with machines that hadn't spoken in decades, but their purpose was clear. The defense system wasn't built to broadcast warnings. It was built to act. And somewhere far beneath the ocean floor, hundreds of human-made drones woke up like sharks rising from the deep. Alien drop ships spread out over the continents, their pilots laughing over comms, their scanners detecting nothing threatening. Easy world, one of them said. They don't even have orbital guns. Another pilot laughed. We'll be home by sunrise. Their arrogance echoed across the fleet like a song. But in the silence of orbit, Earth whispered back. An encrypted signal rippled through the satellites. A line of text appeared in hidden systems that had been asleep for half a century. It wasn't a request. It wasn't a warning. It was a command. A low hum filled the atmosphere, subtle at first, so faint the alien ships ignored it. But deep in the oceans, black metal doors opened one by one, revealing rows of submerged launch systems. In the polar regions, long-buried rail cannons aligned to the sky. The planet didn't scream or panic. It simply prepared. On the flagship, the commander leaned closer to the viewport, amused at how calm everything seemed. "They're too stupid to even know we're here," he said, almost laughing. His arrogance was as vast as the fleet itself. But then the lights flickered for the first time. A small, sharp pulse of static cut through their communications grid. One pilot shouted across the comms, "Did anyone else feel that?" Another barked back, "Probably just atmospheric interference. Keep formation." The static hit again, harder this time. Several ships experienced a flicker across their control panels. The commander narrowed his eyes. "Report." "Nothing, sir," an officer replied quickly. "Minor pulse on all frequencies. It doesn't match any known weapon." No one said it out loud, but deep inside, they had all felt it. A sensation like the air itself was watching them. The commander smirked again, forcing confidence back into his voice. "Then it's nothing," he said. "Keep moving. They won't even know what hit them." But in the darkness beneath the clouds, the old world stirred, quiet and patient. Satellites linked. Bunkers synced. And far above the planet, the stars reflected faint metallic shapes that hadn't been there a moment before. Hidden fleets that didn't broadcast their presence. Machines built not to announce war but to end it. The alien fleet was about to learn what no other invader had lived to tell. Earth didn't send warnings. It let you come close, let you think you were winning, and then it struck. The commander watched the continents grow larger on the screen, still sure of his victory. What he didn't know was that with every kilometer they descended, they were stepping deeper into a trap that had been waiting, silent and patient, for years. And the name of the planet they never bothered to ask about was about to burn itself into their nightmares forever. Earth, the alien fleet glided lower, cutting through the upper atmosphere like black arrows slicing into blue. The commander's voice sharp with pride as the formation tightened, their invasion pattern flawless, perfected over 100 conquests. They believed nothing could stop them. Their drop ships scattered across the continents with surgical precision, ready to hit major cities first, then military installations, then wipe out whatever was left. It was a script they had written long ago and one they expected to follow again tonight. But Earth was not like any world they had faced before. The first squadron dropped through the cloud layer over the Pacific, their engines glowing faint red, their pilots laughing in the comms, voices thick with arrogance. One pilot, a seasoned veteran, sneered as he scanned the ground below. "No defenses," he said. "This is almost boring." Another answered with a chuckle, "Then let's make it fun." But fun never came. The first warning was silence. Not alarms. Not resistance. Not even panic. The cities below didn't react. No shields, no armies scrambling. Just calm darkness. It felt wrong. The pilot flicked his scanner again. "Command, we've got..." His voice cut out mid-sentence. The screen in front of him blinked twice. Then nothing. The entire lead ship vanished from the radar like smoke in the wind. On the flagship, an officer frowned at the sudden empty blip. "Ship 9 is gone," he reported, his voice too calm, pretending nothing was wrong. "Probably a sensor glitch." The commander didn't even look up. Re-establish link. They tried. There was no static. No distress. Just silence. Then ship 10 disappeared. The command deck went still for a heartbeat. The laughter that had filled the comms only minutes ago died without a sound. "What's going on?" the commander barked. Officers tapped at their control panels, fingers moving fast, but the answers weren't coming. "It's like they were erased," someone whispered. Below the clouds, the Pacific was no longer quiet. A pulse, low, deep, almost like the ocean itself exhaling, rolled through the water. Sonar stations hidden beneath the waves blinked awake, sending signals through a defense network the aliens didn't even know existed. From the depths, black steel rose like shadows from a grave. Unregistered structures broke the surface of the ocean, towers with glowing red lines, structures that had been sleeping for decades. The alien fleet didn't see them on their sensors because these weren't normal defenses. They were built to be invisible. Built for exactly this moment. "Another ship is gone," a pilot screamed over comms. "I saw it. His voice was drowned in static as his ship blinked out like a light being switched off. One after another, ships vanished. Not exploded. Not shot down. Gone. Panic began to ripple through the fleet. Officers who had been laughing were now shouting. Pilots cursed, clawing at their controls as if they could fight the darkness around them. "Where are they?" someone yelled. "What's hitting us?" But the truth was simpler and more terrifying. They hadn't even seen the attack. Inside the flagship, the commander's smirk was gone. He gripped the railing tightly, his eyes fixed on the tactical display as dots vanished faster than the officers could count. "Find the source," he growled. But they couldn't. Because the source wasn't in the sky. It was the planet itself. Underneath the oceans, hidden launch bays opened silently, and long black objects, sleek, old, deadly, rose like predators sensing blood. They didn't announce themselves with beams of light or loud engine trails. They simply locked on and struck. One moment, a dropship existed. The next, it was nothing but falling fire. Across the globe, the same thing happened. Over the Atlantic, alien fighters blinked out of existence as ground-based defense cannons hidden in abandoned coastlines turned to life. In Asia, cloaked orbital platforms flickered online, releasing kinetic rods that fell like spears of light. In the Arctic, defense satellites that had been dead for 30 years suddenly realigned and began tracking targets. It wasn't chaos. It was precision. Earth was not defending itself like a cornered prey. It was hunting. The alien commander finally barked, "Raise shields." His voice cracked with the first taste of real fear. The fleet scrambled, systems flaring, shields activating too late. The first wave of human orbital strikes hit like a silent hammer. Entire formations vanished from the tactical display in seconds. In the comms, voices overlapped in a storm of panic. "They're everywhere, I can't see, they're hitting us from below. What kind of weapons are these?" And then silence again as another wing disappeared. The commander slammed his claw against the console. "This isn't possible," he roared. But it was. Because they had walked into a trap. The very moment they crossed the upper atmosphere, Earth had already surrounded them. Not with fleets waiting proudly in orbit, but with quiet teeth hidden beneath its skin. On the ground, no alarms blared. No armies moved. The humans didn't scramble like victims. They watched, silent, as the invaders who hadn't even bothered to learn the name of the planet were dragged into the dark. On the flagship, an officer whispered something no one wanted to hear. "Sir, we should have scanned the world first." But it was too late for scanning. Too late for strategy. Too late for running. Because the planet they thought was just another rock had already decided the outcome. And its name was Earth. The alien fleet was no longer moving like a flawless machine. It was unraveling like cloth caught in a storm. The neat black formation that had entered the sky so confidently was now broken, scattered across the atmosphere like wounded birds trying to find direction. Comms were filled with sharp, panicked voices overlapping, commanders shouting orders no one was following anymore, ships vanishing one after another without a single shot being seen. It was the kind of fear that didn't need explosions. It was silent, creeping, heavy, and it wrapped itself around every alien heart on those ships. The commander on the flagship stood stiff, his jaw clenched, claws digging into the steel railing as the tactical map bled red. A third of his fleet was gone and not a single human ship had been sighted. That was the worst part. It wasn't a war. It was like the sky itself had swallowed them. "Report!" he roared, his voice cracking through the static. "Unknown hostiles." An officer stammered, the arrogance long gone from his tone. "We can't track them, sir. No signatures. No energy spikes. It's like they're ghosts." Another voice cut in, shaky and thin. "They're ghosts in the dark." The commander bared his teeth, but there was fear behind his rage now. "Earth has no recorded defense fleet," he snapped. "No military ships. No orbital cannons. This is impossible." But deep down, in the place where instinct whispers louder than pride, he felt it. The same thing his soldiers were feeling, a quiet, bone-deep dread. This wasn't a soft world. It was something else. Something that had let them come close on purpose. On the ground below, the streets were unnaturally quiet. The cities didn't panic. The skies weren't filled with fire and sirens. That's what unnerved the alien ground troops the most. As their drop ships touched down in empty streets, their boots echoed too loudly on the cracked concrete. No screaming civilians. No running soldiers. Just silence. One alien squad leader stepped into a street lined with abandoned cars, the moonlight shining off their armor. "This is wrong," he muttered in their language. His second-in-command hissed, "Then shoot something." They laughed nervously, but the laugh didn't last long. Their comms crackled with static. Then a voice spoke. Calm, cold, human. "Welcome to Earth." Every alien in that squad froze. The voice didn't shout. It didn't threaten. It just spoke like it already knew the end of the story. A second later, one of the aliens at the back of the formation turned to say something, and he wasn't there. The sound was clean. No struggle. No scream. Just gone. "Squad leader," a soldier whispered. But the squad leader didn't answer. He stared down the alley where the soldier had been standing, the shadows thick and black, as if they were swallowing the light itself. Then another soldier vanished. This time they heard a faint scrape. On the flagship, ground teams began screaming over comms. "Units down, Sector 5. No visuals. Something's in the shadows. They're picking us off." The commander slammed his claw into the console hard enough to crack it. "Show me something," he roared. But the screens gave him nothing. Static. Vanishing signals. Coordinates with no visuals. The humans didn't march out with banners. They didn't light the sky with ships. They didn't need to. They had turned their entire planet into a trap. It wasn't a battlefield. It was a hunting ground. From the shadows of abandoned cities, human strike teams moved like smoke, unseen, unheard, trained to kill in silence. This was their home. Every street, every building, every blind corner was theirs. In an underground control center, buried deep beneath a mountain, human operators watched the alien invasion map with blank faces. No panic. No shouting. Just lines of data scrolling as the defense network tightened like a noose. "Sector 7 clear," a voice reported calmly. "Sector 8, targets dropping." Another voice responded, "Orbital coverage ready. Waiting for signal." Above the clouds, alien ships that had descended too far suddenly found themselves locked in by systems they didn't even know existed. Railgun satellites rotated into position with silent grace. Laser defense nets mapped every ship like it was prey. The aliens thought they were the hunters. They weren't. The commander's eyes twitched as yet another section of his fleet disappeared. He finally whispered, almost to himself, "What is this planet?" No one answered him, but the silence around him said it clearly. It was Earth. The aliens tried to regroup, forming a defensive shell around the flagship, engines screaming as they tried to rise back into orbit, but the air cracked with invisible strikes. Ships erupted into flames before they could even register they were being targeted. "Retreat! Retreat!" one of the wing captains screamed. But there was nowhere to retreat to. Back on the ground, alien soldiers ran through narrow streets, shooting at shadows. They fired at windows, at rooftops, at anything that moved. But for every shot they fired, another squad mate disappeared. Their numbers shrank fast. Fear turned their perfect discipline into chaos. Command, please respond. One alien screamed into his comm. His voice was cut off by a sharp crunching sound and silence. The humans didn't taunt. They didn't brag. They didn't say they were winning. They let the silence do the talking. On the flagship, the commander's claws were shaking now. "Find me the enemy," he whispered. But deep down, he already knew. The enemy wasn't out there in the sky. The enemy was the planet itself. A place that had survived everything thrown at it. A place that didn't scream when attacked. It waited. And then it killed. And now, the invaders who hadn't even bothered to check the name of the world were beginning to understand what it meant. This wasn't just another planet. This was Earth. The alien commander stood in the middle of the flagship's bridge, his breathing sharp and uneven now, the polished steel walls around him echoing with warning alarms that hadn't stopped since the first ships vanished. The once proud fleet that entered this system like a black spear was now nothing more than scattered, bleeding fragments. Lights blinking desperately across the tactical map as red marks multiplied like spreading fire, he stared at. The carnage unfolding in silence, the kind of silence that burned. A few hours ago, this had been the easiest invasion on their schedule. Now, it was turning into something none of their military training had ever prepared them for. 57 ships unresponsive. One officer stammered, the arrogance stripped from his voice. 42 confirmed destroyed. Multiple ground squads. Gone. No visual. No contact. The commander didn't reply. His claws flexed against the railing, the metal groaning under the pressure. Another officer whispered, "We should have scanned the planet." The commander turned slowly, his eyes glowing with fury, but beneath that fury sat something colder, fear. Across the bridge, the main holo display flickered and refocused on the planet below, showing their deployment zones. Cities they thought would fall easily now looked like black holes. Their forces were disappearing inside them and never coming back out. No explosions. No large-scale battles. Just silence. This wasn't war. This was surgical annihilation. On the ground, alien squads moved through abandoned streets with their weapons raised high, their boots crunching over broken glass and leaves, their voices tight over comms. "Where are they?" one soldier hissed. "Why aren't they fighting back?" another answered. "Because they don't have to," and then his voice cut off into static. Another soldier turned around, saw nothing but empty space where his squadmate had been. Fear crawled into their throats like smoke. The commander slammed his claw against the command panel. "Deploy orbital strike packages. Burn their cities to the ground," he roared, his voice cracking the tension like glass. His officers moved quickly, desperate for an order that made sense, something familiar, something loud that could drown out the quiet terror wrapping around them. But when the fleet's heavy strike ships tried to target the cities, the targeting systems went dark. Not jammed. Not damaged. Just gone. A cold black screen where coordinates should have been. "We've lost targeting," an officer shouted. "The systems, they're not responding." Another voice shouted, "They're inside our network. They're inside the ship." A low, cold hum vibrated through the hull of the flagship. It wasn't from their engines. It was from something outside. The commander's throat tightened as the lights flickered again, every screen flashing a single word in ancient human code. Earthfall engaged. The commander's hands trembled for the first time. That word, he didn't know what it meant. But something about it made his instincts scream. "Shut it out. Wipe the systems," he barked. The officers tried, but every attempt only made the code spread faster, crawling through their fleet like a living thing. And then the oldest sound in war cut through the static. A human voice, soft, calm, carried on their own encrypted channel like a whisper crawling through their skulls. "You should have checked the name of the planet." The commander froze. His officers froze. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't angry. It was quiet. And that quiet hurt more than a roar. In orbit, black objects moved through the dark like predators. No engine trails, no lights. They slid between alien ships like sharks moving through murky water. One of the alien destroyers turned its sensors toward the darkness and managed to catch a glimpse. Only a glimpse, of something metallic, massive, ancient, with no broadcast code. Then it exploded in silence. These weren't ships like the aliens were used to fighting. These were relics of a war humanity had promised never to fight again. But they hadn't dismantled them. They had buried them. And now they had risen. Ground squads began transmitting screams instead of coordinates. They are in the buildings, I can't see them, something's behind us, and then nothing. One squad tried to regroup inside an old train station. The power went out. The emergency lights flickered red. One by one, their signals blinked out like candles in the wind. The commander slammed his claws on the console again, rage shaking his voice, fight back. But they couldn't. They weren't fighting anything they could see. On Earth, the human command center beneath the mountains remained calm. Dozens of operators stared at data lines streaming across old screens, their faces emotionless, their movements efficient. Sector 12 neutralized, one voice said softly. Sector 19, 30% remaining. Another voice replied, send drones. Clean up the rest. Above them, the humans had activated only a fraction of their defense grid. They didn't need more. One of the alien ships tried to break orbit, its engines blazing as it attempted to flee the trap, but a rail slug the size of a car tore through it at 10 times the speed of sound. The ship didn't even explode dramatically. It just came apart, ripped into clean, silent pieces that fell into the clouds like ash. The commander stared at the empty space where his fleet had once been, his mouth dry, his claws cold. What are they? He whispered. An officer, pale and shaking, looked up from his console. They are humans, he said, as if saying it out loud made it worse. The commander bared his teeth, his mind racing, trying to stitch together a plan where none existed. His fleet was dying, his ground forces being erased, his systems controlled by the very world he was trying to conquer. And for the first time in his long military career, he realized he wasn't leading an invasion. He was leading a slaughter, his own. He whispered the name of the world like a curse. Earth. And somewhere in the black sky above, human war machines moved closer, unseen, patient, like wolves closing in on the last wounded prey. The commander's breath grew shallow as the alarms on the flagship pulsed like a heartbeat in a dying body. The steel walls that once carried the weight of arrogance now rang with fear. Every officer on the bridge moved in panic, not with the sharp precision of a trained fleet but with the desperation of prey realizing the hunter had been in the room from the beginning. The tactical map no longer looked like a war map. It was a graveyard of red and black. Red where his ships once were, black. Where nothing remained, no wreckage, no signals, just void. The hum that ran through the hull had grown louder, a low, deep sound like the growl of something circling beneath the surface. Sir, Section 7 just went dark, an officer stammered. And Section 9, it's gone too. No escape pods. No distress calls. It's like they never existed. The commander's claws trembled against the railing as he forced himself to look at the holo display, watching the icons of his once unstoppable fleet vanish like someone erasing a chalkboard. His eyes flicked toward the planet below. Earth. The quiet blue and green sphere they thought was prey. It wasn't prey. It was waiting. It had been waiting all along. Pull the fleet back, the commander growled, his voice hoarse but hard, the last trace of authority he could still cling to. Regroup above atmosphere. We'll burn this rock from orbit. Sir, another officer whispered, his face pale and cracked with terror. The upper orbit is gone too. The commander turned sharply. What? They're already above us. The bridge went silent. That single sentence hit harder than any weapon. Above their remaining ships, high in the void where they thought they had the advantage, massive human vessels were emerging from blackness, no light, no signal, no warning. They didn't look like the polished silver ships of galactic fleets. These were older, rougher, like iron forged to wage war without mercy. Their hulls carried scars, their shape designed not for beauty but for killing. The alien sensors had never detected them because they'd been here long before the aliens arrived, cloaked in the quiet of Earth's shadow, patient like a loaded gun behind a closed door. Contact. Multiple contacts above us, another officer shouted. They weren't here before, they were, the commander muttered, his voice suddenly hollow. we just never saw them. The human ships didn't hail them, didn't open comms, didn't send warnings or demands. They simply moved, silent and precise. One by one, their weapons aligned, locking onto the alien fleet like wolves locking their teeth around a throat. "Raise shields," the commander screamed. But even as the order left his mouth, the first human barrage fell. Kinetic rounds tore through alien shields like they weren't even there. Ships that had once been invincible folded like paper under invisible hands. There was no light show, no cinematic explosion. Just brutal, clean destruction. A frigate disintegrated in a single hit. A destroyer spun out of formation, cut in half like meat on a table. The alien comms filled with screams. "They're behind us, they're inside the grid, we can't track them." The commander clenched his jaw, sweat running down his temples as one after another, his ships died. His warships, his pride, his power, were being dismantled by a force that never raised its voice. On the surface, alien soldiers scattered like insects under boot. Human strike teams moved like shadows, never staying long enough to be shot, hitting from rooftops, alleys, underground tunnels. Entire squads disappeared between buildings that seemed to breathe. Even when the aliens fired wildly, they hit nothing but empty air. In the human command bunker buried deep beneath the mountain, a man in a dark uniform stared at the monitors calmly. His voice was steady, almost cold. "Sector 8 neutralized. Sector 11 collapsing. Rail platforms, continue firing pattern Delta." Another operator responded, "Copy. Their flagship still active." The man leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. "Then we break it." In orbit, human warships moved like a curtain of black iron. They closed around the alien flagship, boxing it in from all sides. The commander's officers shouted for warp jumps, escape routes, any way out, but every trajectory was already locked. No matter where they turned, Earth was already there. The trap wasn't being sprung. It had been sprung the moment they crossed the atmosphere. The commander slammed his claw on the console. "We were supposed to crush them," he hissed, his voice cracking. "They are primitive." "No," one of his terrified officers whispered, "they're predators." The next barrage hit their escorts. The flagship shuddered violently, lights flickering, consoles sparking as debris from their own fleet scattered like burning ash. Through the viewports, the commander saw human ships drifting toward them with calm, deliberate movements. It wasn't a chase. It was an execution. Down on the surface, the alien ground troops finally broke. Panic crushed discipline. Units ran in every direction, firing blindly into the shadows. Every step they took, every corner they turned, another of their number disappeared. They screamed into comms for pickup that would never come. The commander grabbed the edge of the table, his voice rising into a hoarse roar, "Someone respond. Someone fight back." But the fleet no longer had anyone left who could answer. What had started as an invasion had become a slaughter. And then the human voice returned. Not over open comms this time. Straight into their bridge systems. "Calm. Quiet. You should have checked the name of the planet." The commander's claws went limp. That voice wasn't taunting. It was stating a fact. The human ships stopped firing. They didn't need to rush. The alien flagship floated alone in the dark now, surrounded, burning from the edges like a dying star. The planet below glimmered beneath them, quiet, calm, as if nothing had happened. The commander lowered his head, realization settling on him like a weight he couldn't lift. This wasn't a war Earth had to win. This was a war they'd already prepared for. They hadn't reacted to the invasion. They had been waiting for it. And now the galaxy's greatest predators were learning what happened when you walk into Earth uninvited. The bridge of the alien flagship was no longer a command center. It was a coffin made of steel, the air thick with smoke and fear. The alarms had stopped screaming minutes ago because there was no point anymore. They were no longer warning of danger. Danger had already arrived and made itself at home. The once proud crew that had mocked this planet now whispered in shaky breaths, "There." Arrogance stripped from their faces like ash washed away by rain. Their screens that had once shown their fleet's power now displayed nothing but red emptiness. Ship after ship gone. squad after squad silent, orbit closing in around them like the jaws of an animal that had always known how this hunt would end. The commander stared at the viewport, his eyes wide and burning as he watched human warships drift through the darkness in perfect silence. No banners, no lights, no mercy, just calm movements, steady, deliberate, unstoppable. The kind of movements that didn't belong to prey. They belonged to apex predators who had already decided the outcome long before their enemies understood what was happening. His claws dug into the armrest, the steel bending beneath the pressure, his throat tight, breath shallow, his officers standing frozen behind him, waiting for an order that would never save them. "They are surrounding us," one whispered, the words breaking apart like dry leaves. "They already have," the commander answered, his voice low, hoarse, as if even he finally understood. In orbit, the remaining human ships spread out like a black crown around the dying alien flagship, their weapons glinting faintly in the void, a slow orbit forming that cut off every escape vector, every chance at survival. They didn't rush the kill. They didn't need to. Because the enemy wasn't a threat anymore, it was a lesson. On the ground, the last alien soldiers stumbled through the ruins of empty cities, firing their weapons at shadows that moved too fast to follow, shouting orders no one heard, calling for pickups that would never come. A single squad made it to a rooftop and stared at the sky, watching their fleet burn in silence, their ships falling through the clouds like black stars, and in that moment, they understood what their commander was only beginning to accept. This wasn't a war, it was punishment. The commander turned sharply as a voice cut through the silent bridge, not from his officers, not from his systems, but from the same calm, human transmission that had haunted them since the first ship vanished. It wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. "Leave your weapons," the voice said, "or we'll leave nothing." The officers shifted, their claws tapping nervously on the deck, their fear a living thing crawling through the room. The commander clenched his jaw. His people had never surrendered before. They had built an empire on conquest, on fear, on the belief that no world could stand against them. But Earth had stood. Earth hadn't just stood. It had hunted them. And it had never even raised its voice. "Sir," one officer whispered, "we have no fleet left." The commander didn't answer, because he didn't have to. Through the viewport, he could see the truth for himself. Human warships moved like shadows in water, slow and precise, encircling what remained of his flagship. Their hulls were marked with no flags, no names, just the scars of 1,000 battles fought and won in silence. A chill crawled down his spine as he realized something far worse than defeat. They had underestimated not just the planet but the species that called it home. He looked down at the tactical map, but there was nothing left to command. His fleet was dead. His soldiers were gone. The sky was no longer theirs. Even the air on the bridge felt like it belonged to someone else now. And then he saw it. A small white signal blinking on the screen, moving closer toward his ship. Not a massive ship. Not a battleship. A single human vessel, sleek, black, moving with the confidence of something that didn't need to be large to end everything. It approached without firing, without warning, like it was walking through its own home. On the surface of Earth, deep underground, in a bunker older than his empire, the human commander gave a quiet order. "End this." The small ship stopped directly in front of the alien flagship, its hull reflecting faint light. A transmission clicked through on the alien bridge. A single human face appeared on their screen, wearing no expression, no anger, no triumph. Just calm. That calm felt heavier than any weapon. "This is your only warning," the human said softly. "You leave now. And you never come back. Because next time," the human's eyes hardened slightly, "we won't bother talking." The transmission ended. The screen went black. No grand speeches. No roars. No declarations. Just a quiet promise. The commander's claws loosened around the chair. His fleet had been crushed without a war. His soldiers erased like a bad dream. His name would be remembered not as a conqueror but as a fool who walked into a graveyard smiling. He turned slowly to his remaining officers. They stared at him like broken statues, waiting for an answer, for a fight that no longer existed. He let out a shaky breath. "Retreat," he whispered, the word tasting like ash. Get us out of here. The flagship's engines burned weakly as the last surviving alien vessel pulled away, not with the pride of victors but with the quiet, shameful limp of survivors. As they broke orbit, the human ships didn't chase. They simply hovered there, silent, watching, their presence alone enough to carve fear into the invaders' bones. On the surface, human strike teams faded back into the shadows, disappearing as if they were never there. The cities remained quiet. The skies returned to stillness. Earth didn't celebrate. Earth never celebrated survival. It just waited for the next fool to try. The commander sat alone on the bridge, staring at the fading image of the blue planet, the name carved into his mind like a scar he would carry forever. Earth. The world they hadn't bothered to scan. The world they had laughed at. The world that almost killed them without breaking a sweat. And somewhere behind that silent planet, the stars held their breath, because every empire in the galaxy knew that once Earth had awakened, the next invader wouldn't get to run.